Good afternoon. It's so exciting to speak before such an auspicious group of business leaders. I'd like to thank Sandy Barua for having me come and share a few words with you, and looking forward to the panel that's coming up right after. You know, they asked me to talk about New Orleans and Detroit, and I thought about it. I said, when people think about New Orleans and when they think about Detroit, what do they think about? And so I said, New Orleans, birthplace of jazz, you know, Bourbon Street, you know, a majority-minority city with over half of the population being non-white. They might think about it being the oldest port city. When one thinks about Detroit, what do they think about? They think about Woodward, maybe 8 Mile. One might think about Motown, the MotorCity, you know, the $5 a day, you know, wage that brought so many people from all around the country and all around the world to Detroit. All exciting stuff. But, you know, when I look at Detroit and I look at New Orleans, I rewind back to 1960. In 1960, Detroit had the highest per capita income in the country. And New Orleans was larger than Houston and larger than Atlanta. What happened? Well, these economies, they failed to diversify, plain and simple. And years of, you know, bad decisions led to corruption, led to urban decay and blight. And so one says, what's different now? Well, I'll tell you, I moved to New Orleans about 5 years ago as the president and CEO of the New Orleans Business Alliance. And when I got there, they said, baby, either you with us or you against us. Are you with us or are you against us? I said, I'm with you. When I moved to Detroit about 5 months ago, I got Detroit versus everybody. And I said, okay, I get this. These are cities that are resilient, that have a grittiness and a griminess, and that are willing to fight for their sustainability and to reposition themselves in the global economy. Looking at the competitive position of Detroit, you know, 63 of the top 100 automotive suppliers in the country are in Michigan, and 60 of those are in the Detroit region. That's pretty impressive. You know, we've got the greatest infrastructure in the country, arguably as it relates to miles of freeway, railway connection, and the port. The region is home to the second busiest northern border crossing with Canada. That's not a bad place to start from. And of course, you've got Detroit versus everybody. You've got residents that are diehard Detroiters, and the rest of the country and the rest of the world is rediscovering what makes Detroit, Detroit. As president and CEO of the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, it's really our job to leverage our expertise to figure out how do we drive growth, investment, and how do we drive jobs. Jobs and investment. Those are kind of the two key things that we look at. Bringing jobs and investment together to create a sustainable and robust and an inclusive economy. You can't get there unless you know where you're going. And many of you have probably heard me talk about the 5 Ps. The first P was plan. You got to have a plan for where you're going. You got to know that North Star is over there. The second P is about partnership. Now, I'm going to ask this question. Now, how many of you do not live in the city of Detroit? Like 80, 90%. How many of you do not work in the city of Detroit? About 60, 70%. That's encouraging because the second P is partnership. We've got to work together, and the fact that you're down here today to talk about Detroit says that we've come a long way as a region. The third P is really about thinking about people. We've got to remember we've got a 27% unemployment rate. We've got 58% of kids living in poverty. We've got to focus on people, not just bringing in new people, but the people that have been here. And then the fourth P is around posting and publishing. If you Google Detroit, you'll get a bunch of different stories, and most of them aren't by people that live in Detroit or work in Detroit. And then the last P is you got to repopulate the city. Even with the blank slate of bankruptcy, it's really difficult for a city of 690,000 people to support an infrastructure for 2 million people. Well, you got to set that North Star, though. So how do you get there? Number one, what is there like? Greater investments. We've got all this investment that's happened over the last few years in terms of the Ilitch Arena deal, in terms of the M1 rail, in terms of Gilbert owning more than 70 buildings in downtown Detroit. All of that's great. But we've got to move to the point to where there's less and less subsidy and there's more of market-driven demand. We've got to be a leader in entrepreneurship, and we've really got to leverage the people and the talent that's here. We've got to not only leverage the talent that we want to bring, but we've got to figure out how to take advantage of the latent talent that's already here. We've got to become a global city that's reflective of the best of America. What does that mean? That means that we recognize that it's a global marketplace. We can focus on things like foreign direct investment and trade promotion to grow our companies and bring new money in, and that it's an inclusive opportunity for everybody that lives here. We've got to be a place that has quality of life and great schools, not good schools, not adequate schools. We've got to figure out how to fix the school situation. We've got a unique opportunity in Detroit because of the land that we have and the need for people to actually be where the economy is going, play to where the economy is going to be in 20, 25 years instead of where the economy is today. As I think about that, though, it's really about a process of change. How do you change? Well, John F. Kennedy said, change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. And then Maya Angelou said, if you don't like something, change it, and if you can't change it, change your attitude. And I believe it was Patti LaBelle who said, I got a new attitude. I'm excited because Detroit has a new attitude, and the new attitude is evident by everybody that's in the room today. Winston Churchill said, to improve is to change, and to be perfect is to change often. This process of going from where we've been to where we want to be is going to involve momentous shifts in policy, technology, and strategy, and that's hard work. That's really, really tough work. But the more difficult piece of this is that it all hinges on people. So as the president and CEO of the Detroit Economic Growth Corporation, it's not my job just to carry it on my back. It's not the job of our mayor, who's an awesome mayor, just to carry it on his back. It's the job of all of us in this room to figure out how do we change and move to that place where we want to be. There's really, how do you lead for change? First, you've got to figure out where you're going. So we've got to determine what winning looks like, and we have to measure that, What does winning look like for us, and how do we get there? We got to figure out the end game at the beginning. What are the markets that we're competing against? What are our competitive advantages as a cluster, in our clusters? And if we don't win, then what? And all of these decisions need to be based on quality market intelligence. That's what leading for change looks like. We've got to communicate a clear direction internally and externally. I talked to people all over the state before I moved here, and most of them didn't have very good things to say about Detroit. So we've got to share where we're going as Detroit with the rest of the state and with the rest of the country. We've got to continue to put people first, and we've got to create a culture where thoughtfulness, leadership, and measured risk are appreciated. That's what change is all about. We've got to reinforce our strengths. The best place to start off is from where we're already strong and figure out how do we reinforce that and diversify. We've got to have 360-degree thinking about what kind of city do we want to live in, what kind of city do the people that have been here for 30, 40, 50 years, what kind of city do they deserve, and what kind of city do the people and companies we want to attract deserve. That's what leading for change looks like. Now, there are really only two responses to change. One is you can avoid change. Have we ever done that here? Have we avoided change? That didn't work. Or we can drive change. We can respond to the market demands for new products, approaches, and results, and redefine the space of what it looks like to be a great global city. I want to be a part of a great global city, don't you? Yeah, come on. We can do that through better government, and the mayor's done a lot to really increase transparency and increase the quality of services here, and I think that's a big piece of it. Better leadership, not just better leadership politically, better leadership civically, better leadership across the board. Everyone has a role to play. And we've got to remember to stay focused on issues of economic equity. We got to diversify, embrace the global economy. We've got over 1,300 businesses from 38 countries in the city of Detroit. And we've got to embrace that more. That's a big part of where we need to be. So where are we going? Detroit has a bright future. But to get there, we've got to acknowledge and embrace where we've been. There's no shame in Detroit. There's no shame in our story. We've got to own our story, and we've got to tell our story. The beauty of our story is the Detroit versus everybody. And we've got an opportunity to participate in long-term growth in a way that we've never had before. We have to do it as a region. We have to do it as a state. we have to do it as a country. Detroit is a jewel. We will be able to measure this by the increase in people, the increase in investment, and the increase in quality of life. But more important than those metrics, you'll know it because we'll see it all around us. Our kids will want to come back. Our friends that left many years ago will want to come back. And hopefully many of you that live all around the country, all around the region, will decide to move to the city of Detroit. Thank you.